Hello and welcome to Wilson Center Now, a production of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. I'm John Molesky. Our guest today is Emmanuel Matambo. Emmanuel is a Southern Voices Network for Peacebuilding Scholar with the Wilson Center's Africa program and a postdoctoral fellow with the Department of Political Science at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. He joins us to discuss his research work here at the center, which is focused on Africa-China relations, specifically China-Zambia relations. Welcome, Emmanuel. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
So I read a blog piece that you wrote about learning Chinese in Zambia, and I think that says a lot about the entire move by China into the continent and trying to expand its influence. Tell us about that blog piece about learning Chinese, now part of the curriculum in Zambia.
Well, I came across that particular argument because I've realized that China-Zambia relations and China-Africa relations are no longer the exclusive preserve of political actors. Now we have seen that there is a lot of interaction between African citizens and Chinese migrants, and one of the components of interpersonal relationship is to know each other's language. So that is why I said those with the interest and the means should learn Mandarin. I think it would really help to ease up the opportunities for Africans who would want to study in China, for example, and also to ease up their interaction with Chinese migrants coming to the continent.
And you mentioned those migrants. How many migrants are currently in Zambia from China?
The number is quite problematic and very difficult to pin down. The government would always concentrate on permit holders, but then the immigration system in Zambia is such that if you come with a permit holder, especially an investment permit, for example, the government wouldn't really take stock of the people that you come with, your dependents. So I would say the number is around 20,000, but then those 20,000 are the people who are actually permit holders. Whether or not they come with dependents is another factor, so the number could actually be higher than what has been reported by the government. But those who are detractors of China would want to inflate the number so that they drop this Chinese specter. The government, which is mostly defensive of the Chinese, would tone down the number. So that is why it is disputed to.
And what is the native population welcoming to the visitors, or are they a little suspicious? What is the general consensus?
The general consensus is that it depends on the political line that you are affiliated to. So for Zambians, for example, who are more affiliated with the opposition political parties in Zambia, they raise the alarm of the Chinese specter. But for Zambians who are more affiliated with the current government in Zambia, China is more like a breath of fresh air. But then, of course, the disputes that have manifested themselves into relations between China and Chinese migrants and Zambian citizens shows that there is some tension. Although, because of lack of job opportunities, Zambians who work for Chinese look at the Chinese as, well, respite from destitution.
Is there any political traction for politicians who run on an anti-China platform?
Zambia has actually been very outstanding in that, especially in 2006. The general election of that particular year in Zambia was actually a referendum on China and its impact on Zambia. And Michael Sata, our previous president, used that very well.
And how important is Chinese investment to the economy overall?
It has been quite very important. To now, Zambia owes about 30% of its external debt to China. So there has been that economic impact on China in Zambia. But then whether or not it's sustainable, the jury is still out on it.
Well, what is your assessment as far as, look, any nation that invests anywhere around the globe outside its borders, it's a combination of generosity and influence, a search for influence or profit. Is China viewed as a positive ally in general, or are they seen as exploiting the continent or specifically the country?
So again, it comes back to what I said at the beginning. It depends on who is appraising China at a specific time. For the Zambian government, especially the current Zambian government, it has incurred a bad name in the West, for example. So China is seen more as an escape mechanism, as an alternative to desperation. So the government is very sanguine about China, but the opposition political members, Zambians who are struggling under financial difficulty, they look at China as having a malevolent impact on Zambia, especially China's non-interference policy, which has not been really interrogated, is in effect a blank check for Misru in Africa, and that could become problematic. Although African governments, especially odious regimes, look at China as a messiah of some sort.
Is Zambia ahead or behind in terms of involvement with China when you look at the wider continent?
Zambia is actually ahead because most of the things that have happened in Zambia haven't happened anywhere else on the continent. Even in terms of disillusionment over Chinese and the disenchantment of the general population hasn't really been noticed anywhere else on the continent. But we have to credit President Michael Chilufya-Sata, who brought the Chinese subject to the very center of Zambia's political discourse. So what is happening in Zambia will only be felt in the rest of the continent because they have more or less paid a blind eye to China's increasing influence on the continent.
What's been the economic influence is clear and, as you say, significant. What about impact on culture and on politics?
The Confucius Institute has been China's main driver.
Explain to people who may not be familiar what the Confucius Institutes are, and they've been around for a little while right now.
The Confucius Institute was mooted in China in 2004, and it is a vehicle through which China intends to export its culture, or not really export its culture, but to let the world know its culture and its language. So it is mostly ensconced in universities, and in Zambia we have a Confucius Institute. So that has kind of impacted on the culture of Zambians, especially those at the University of Zambia who have first-hand information of the Confucius Institute. But what I would love to see, though, is a cultural fusion. In as much as we are imbibing Chinese culture and Chinese language, the Chinese should also meet us halfway, because if there has to be some cultural synergy, then the traffic has to go both ways.
Are there any things that you're recommending looking forward to how to manage the relationship or how to manage the growth, the economic growth that might come with it responsibly?
China, first of all, has to become very open, especially in terms of being prescriptive in its engagement with the rest of the world. It shouldn't hide behind the veneer of no strings attached policy, because first of all, that is a diplomatic charade, because no policy is totally independent of conditions. And secondly, if you want to help Africa to become sustainable, then you have to, at some point, you have to state exactly when you see that Africans are missing it and that whatever they're doing is not going to be sustainable. So China has to do that. And secondly, the Zambian government has to curb corruption as well, because a lot of the anti-Chinese sentiment we are seeing in Zambia is because of people's disillusionment, not because Chinese are usurpers of Zambia's economic space, but the Zambian economy itself has not percolated to benefit the ordinary Zambians, and the Chinese are looked upon as scapegoats, more or less like the way xenophobic sentiment usually thrives in South Africa in areas where the economy is very bad. So that is what the government should do, and civil society should be more engaged in calling out the government out.
Are the trend lines in that regard positive or negative?
Well, at the moment, we could say that it is both ways, because the Zambian government should realize that Zambians are very, very critical of what is happening in China, and they sometimes demonstrate that through their voting patterns. You find that when the current political party in Zambia was an opposition political party, it thrived on anti-Chinese sentiment, and the voting patterns showed in Lusaka and the Copper Belt, where Chinese influence is mostly felt, that the ruling party of the day was actually losing votes in those particular areas. So people are actually influenced on China's encroachment on Zambia.
Yes, some things are universal in politics, and it seems always easier to run against something than for something, to be a critic.
Indeed.
Tell us about your experience with the Southern Voices Network. Has that been useful to your work?
The experience has been enriching beyond my expectations. I was very apprehensive before I came to the United States, because there has always been this speculation about the political system in the United States. But when I came here, for the first time in my life, I could say I was never... I found all the books that I needed, all the information that I needed. The convivial work environment here helped me as well. And the Library of Congress, I think every scholar in the world has a dream of one day accessing the Library of Congress. I was very privileged to be there as well. And it was my first time in the United States, so I'm very grateful for that.
Emmanuel, you lit up like a kid in a candy store when I asked you about your experience here. And so you'll stay in touch with the Wilson Center, remain part of the network?
I will sure do. I will always keep the Wilson Center abreast of what I'm doing on my research. Actually, I'm already writing some things that I have derived from here, and I will keep you guys abreast.
Great. And what's next? Where do you head next?
Now I'm going back to South Africa. I hope that maybe in the next couple of years I'll generate a couple of journal articles that I have derived from my research so far, and hopefully write a book.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to that. When you write the book, promise you'll come back and talk about it.
I will share it.
And if you'd like to read some of Emmanuel's current writings and look at more, you can check the Wilson Center website and come to the Africa program. And there will be links to it. And you'll send us that new stuff that you write in future years, and we'll stay in touch.
Indeed.
Great to have you here for your tenure, and great to have you for this interview. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you too.
Thanks to all of you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Wilson Center Now and that you'll join us again soon. Until then, for all of us at the Wilson Center, I'm John Molesky. Thanks for joining us.